Thank you. Thank you for having me. I think it's an experience, I think, for me as well. To talk about my defining moments, there are actually multiple moments in my career. There are lots of them over the last 10, 14 years that, before my MBA, post my MBA, while working with the Birla Group that have actually been significant. But I think for me, what defined it for me, frankly speaking, would actually be the fact that, when I started my career with Birla Sun Life Insurance, the kind of trust and faith that my head of HR put in me, right? I mean, I don't know how to explain that, but, he was genuinely full of belief that, I can do what I'm supposed to do and that I have the potential to grow. And that actually changed my entire, I would say, outlook on how I was as an HR professional, how I can add value, what is my potential, who am I, and what do I want to do in the future. And it actually kind of, in the first 6 months cemented for me, that I want to be part of this industry as an HR person. And I don't mean insurance, but as an HR professional. And I think, that's something that I've tried to recreate in different ways and forms with my own team. So all future teams that I've been part of, I've had the opportunity to lead as well, that I have tried to use similar, um, you know, I would say traits that my boss did, define for me, so that, they also feel similar, so that, because I think that's the cornerstone of it all. If you know and you believe that, you're good at what you do, or you can be good at what you do when you start your career, I think that's what helps. I think for me, that was one defining moment. I think there are multiple times when, these small moments that I would define as multiple moments happened. Also, I think to add to that, winning the award, and I was the first person in the financial services at that time to win an award both at Aditya Birla Capital as well as Aditya Birla Group from an HR side. Till then, we only had one other individual who was part of the group who'd won both the awards. So I think then ABG, in fact, was a global award. So I think that was one big thing for me as well. So I think these are the few things that I would say. I mean, over the years, of course, you have multiple moments that, come, go, and, that you pick up snippets from, you learn from some, you don't want to deal with others. So I think there are multiple, I think, but for me, it is more about realizing that, this is what I want to do. And this is the kind of person that I want to be. I want to lead. I want to be known for. I think that's where it stems from. So I always maintain that as my key moments. I think. See, for me, there are a few key qualities. Now, it may of course vary across different individuals, because each one, and of course, our HR books say something, management books say something. But for me, I think there are three main things that I count for, being the key qualities. For me, integrity above all else. I think that the thing supersedes that. Integrity involves everything. Are you partial in your team? Are you biased in your team? How are you treating people? Of course, I mean, the morals and ethics are unsaid. I mean, that's anyways primary. But how do you treat your team? Do you have favorites? Do you not have favorites? Because while you may not think that you're being, morally, you may think you're being morally right, there are other areas that can also impact. So for me, integrity is actually a large word, and it kind of encompasses everything. So for me, that's one. I think open communication and respect, I think that stands out for me the most, apart from integrity. And I think resilience. I think as a leader, if you want to be a good one, and an effective one, I think resilience is something that you should have, because you'll have a lot of stuff that is thrown your way. And, some of it good, some of it bad, some of it crippling even. And how do you pick yourself and your team, and you guide your team and the organization for a better future, primarily becomes, something that actually will test how good you are or how bad you are. Because once you're a leader, you can't just crumble at the sight of something that goes wrong or something that's difficult. Even if you don't have an answer, you need to know how to find a solution. And that only comes, basis how resilient you are and how good you are. Because there could be times when, you are good at what you do, but it could happen that, what's thrown at your way, it kind of jars you at that point of time. It kind of, you may fumble, and, you may just draw a blank at that point of time. So how do you rise above that? How do you go back deep inside and find, okay, this is a solution? And, also being able to ask for help, or look for help within your team, outside your team, wherever it's required. I think that's something that for me is also very important. So I think that's what I think are the key qualities that any good leader should have. I mean, there are multiple more. I mean, being strategic, being a kind person, etc. There are lots of things, but for me, if you have these three, I think you kind of lead the show for a lot many more, and everything grows along with time. And to answer your question, that's how it's evolved for me as well. So from where I started to where I am today, joining as a management trainee long back, and from there growing into the role that I was in, I think it all adds up. I mean, it's an evolving style of leadership, I would say, or qualities grow. So I think by the time I left India, at least if I look at my role there, then I would say that, my style of leadership was more of an affiliative and transformational type of leadership. And of course, you throw in a little bit of transactional element into the pot because, you can't say, okay, I'll not do this or I'll not do that. We worked in, I mean, insurance or financial services is chaotic as a market. And, you can't really hold on to saying that, okay, you know what, I'll do only this bit and I'll only do that bit. I have a team, they should do the rest. I don't believe in that kind of leadership. So I think, how do you work well with each other? How do you give positive feedback? How do you look at newer ways of doing things? And how do you, make things better, efficient processes, make things more streamlined? I think all of that has led to me evolve into the kind of leader I am today. So it's it's an ongoing process. I think I have a lot more to do. I don't know if I'm there yet where I want to be, and I think see, for me, there are a few key qualities. Now, it may of course vary across different individuals because each one, and of course, our HR books say something, and management books say something. But for me, I think there are three main things that I count for, being the key qualities. For me, integrity above all else. I think that the thing supersedes that. Integrity involves everything. Are you partial in your team? Are you biased in your team? How are you treating people? Of course, I mean, the morals and ethics are unsaid. I mean, that's anyways primary. But how do you treat your team? Do you have favorites? Do you not have favorites? Because while you may not think that you're being, morally, you may think you're being morally right, there are other areas that can also impact. So for me, integrity is actually a large word and it kind of encompasses everything. So for me, that's one. I think open communication and respect, I think that stands out for me the most, apart from integrity. And I think resilience. I think as a leader, if you want to be a good one, you and an effective one, I think resilience is something that you should have because you'll have a lot of stuff that is thrown your way. And some of it good, some of it bad, some of it crippling even. And how do you pick yourself and your team and you guide your team and the organization for a better future primarily becomes something that actually will test how good you are or how bad you are. Because once you're a leader, you can't just crumble at the sight of something that goes wrong or something that's difficult. Even if you don't have an answer, you need to know how to find a solution, and that only comes basis how resilient you are and how good you are. Because there could be times when you are good at what you do, but it could happen that what's thrown at your way, it kind of jars you at that point of time. It kind of you may fumble, and you may just draw a blank at that point of time. So how do you rise above that? How do you go back deep inside and find, okay, this is a solution? And also being able to ask for help or look for help within your team, outside your team, wherever it's required. I think that's something that for me is also very important. So I think that's what I think are the key qualities that any good leader should have. I mean, there are multiple more. I mean, being strategic, being a kind person, etc. There are lots of things, but for me, if you have these three, I think you kind of lead the show for a lot many more, and everything grows along with time. And to answer your question, that's how it's evolved for me as well. So from where I started to where I am today, joining as a management trainee long back, and from there growing into the role that I was in, I think it all adds up. I mean, it's an evolving style of leadership, I would say, or qualities grow. So I think by the time I left India, at least if I look at my role there, then I would say that, my style of leadership was more of an affiliative and transformational type of leadership. And of course, you throw in a little bit of transactional element into the pot because you can't say, okay, I'll not do this or I'll not do that. We worked in, I mean, insurance or financial services is chaotic as a market, and you can't really hold on to saying that, okay, you know what, I'll do only this bit and I'll only do that bit. I have a team, they should do the rest. I don't believe in that kind of leadership. So I think, how do you work well with each other? How do you give positive feedback? How do you look at newer ways of doing things? And how do you, make things better, efficient processes, make things more streamlined? I think all of that has led to me evolve into the kind of leader I am today. So it's now, it's an ongoing process. I think I have a lot more to do. I don't know if I'm there yet where I want to be. And I think what's better what's better back there, everything. India is still one of my favorite places to work. I don't change that. The only thing that's better here, I would say, to a great extent, is the fact that I can leave office at 5:30, which is the official time. Whereas in India, you don't end up doing that because there's always something or the other. But funnily, I do miss that at times because it's more vibrant from where I came. So honestly, the culture here is very different. I think, when you move towards, East Asia, etc., a lot different compared to how we are in India. So, whether you talk about people in the street versus, when you come to office, it's all different. In India, and if you smile at some people on the street, they'll smile back. I mean, you don't go smiling at random people, but at least, you know, whereas the same is not here. Uh, People don't say sorry or thank you or excuse me out here. They just push you and go on the street. So it's very weird for me. I don't get that. So I kind of accepted that part over the last 1.5 year, almost 2 years now that I'm living here. From a workplace, I think it's very, very different. I think if you ask me, to start with, people are more formal here, and they love keeping work relationships strictly professional. Whereas where we come from in India, it's not the same, right? Yeah, I mean, if you look at India, some of my closest friends are from work. I mean, and which I've built over the last so many years, whether they're from my early organizations or, from wherever. But that's not the case here. They will go out for a drink or a cup of coffee with you, but, it's not the same. It's not that, you can build, I mean, I'm not saying that everyone doesn't. You do, of course, have, but it's very different. It's not as similar to how India is. Second thing is people are not very open to feedback. For this side of the world, it's more taken as criticism. So, you really have to be very careful, So if something is wrong, you really need to find the right words and the right way to communicate it without being confrontational, because they do not, like confrontation. So, and it's it's very difficult because, the industry that you're in is a very fast-paced industry. So I work in insurance right now, and that's very, very fast-paced. So if something's not right, you just want, okay, let's solve it, move on ahead to the next one. But you're spending a few minutes additionally trying to think, okay, how do you deal with this a little bit more softly? Because while you want to point out what's wrong, you don't want them to take it as criticism, because it's not. There's a difference between something being wrong, which could be just X. It does not mean that their way of doing it is wrong. It's just that it could be that situation is not correct. So that's a couple of things that have changed for me. So I think culture is very important. I don't think there is another way to play it. Frankly speaking, I think it's always going to be an important aspect of any organization. And if you want to succeed, I think it's very important that good leaders put forth the right kind of mindset. They put forth the right kind of culture, the kind of environment that you would want people to work in. You need to build something where people are, where the employees that you work with day in and day out, whether it's a small company or a large company, they feel motivated and inspired to come every day. Your customers feel that they can trust you. So whatever product you're selling, whether it is an FMCG product, or it's an insurance or financial services instrument, or it is a tech product, it doesn't matter, right? It has to be a good product, and it is a good product. And it being a good product, is only what leads to our customers trusting you. So it all builds together into the, if you're cutting corners somewhere, that impacts the culture of the organization, because you're going to have customers who don't trust you. You're going to have employees who are wondering, okay, what kind of organization am I working for that's cutting corners somewhere else? So I think it's very important that if you want good customers, you want good employees, and you want to build a good brand, you need to have the right kind of culture on board. And this is primarily top down. If you are very autocratic at the top, very difficult to build a culture where you'll have people who work well together. It's not possible. I mean, yeah, it works for smaller organization, the mom and pop shops that you have, or smaller agencies, which have 10, 12 people, where it means, where it's more about getting the job done, you finish and you move, right? Or setups where, you need people, there's high attrition because of, it could be compensation reasons, etc. But that's a different story. But culture still has to be key. It depends on, and in today's world, if you look at it, look at the generation that's coming out, right? Every generation is different. You look at our parents, you look at our grandparents, they were more open to the kind of, I would say rules or guidelines that an organization set. Okay, come in at 9 o'clock means coming in at 9 o'clock. Leaving at 6 would mean leaving at 6. Your boss tells you to work on a Saturday, you work on a Saturday. You have to do something, you have to do something. I mean, you would never, very rarely would you ask, and I'm talking about people, I'm not talking about, people who are meant for, let's say, greater things. I'm talking about the average Joe, right? Basic people who are working 9 to 5 jobs like all of us. I don't think my father ever questioned. He was a merchant navy. He got a contract. Okay, he went for it. Finished, came back. Simple. You don't question too much. If you look at our generation, at least my generation, you're young, so my generation, we ask questions, but we also still will come into office. Okay, we may not come in at 9, but we'll try coming in by 9:30. Just giving a relative example. Don't take it, exact. When you go to the next generation after ours, it changes. Many more questions and expectations change. So I think with every generation coming in, culture, which is the core, will play a big role in this. So how you set your organization. If you're too autocratic, the new generation that we have today is not going to be able. So I think you have to be an open organization, right? You can't be very, very closed. You have to be open, because not just because this is the Gen Z, but I think the generation after it as well. I think it's going to change how we look at the workforce and how we imagine what work is supposed to be. Whether it's right or wrong, I have my views, but then those are mine personally. I always feel that, I feel that any workplace needs a mix. It needs a balance, rather, not a mix. I would say a balance of work and experience, and of course, a little bit of fun or, engagement, you can call it. So I think I don't get the new generation. It's a little tougher for me, though I'm not very far away from their age group. But that's also maybe could be because I have my own ways of how I interpret things. Am I not open to learning? No, I'm more than happy to understand what they want. And I think organizations need to be open to learn, to be more open to understand what their needs are, see what fits within their org culture. Because you can't deviate too much from your existing organization culture to fit one generation, because any organization will have multiple generations of people that work with them. If you look at Zurich today, I have someone who's at 20, but I also have someone who's sitting at 65. So I can't, simply say, okay, you know what, everyone, no, come in at 8 o'clock. We wanted to come at 8. So what we've done here is we've built a flexi structure. So we have a flexi working structure. So you can come in at 8 and leave at 4:30, or you can come in at 4. I think come at 8:30, leave at 5, come at 9, leave at 5:30. So it makes it flexible. So usually when you come into office, you'll always see the slightly older. So I come in about 9 and I leave about 5:30, 6, sometimes 7. But if you see, it's usually the older generation that comes in a little earlier. That'll come in your senior heads, your leadership team, that comes in by between 8:30, 9. And then it's down the ladder that come in between 9:30 to 11, and that's how it primarily works. So you see that shift, So there's just one example. The multiple, things, leaves for birthdays have now, if you see over a period of time, been added into the game. So you look at your policies, see how you can work around it. You'll have, if you see organizations that have a lot of operational junior level employees that do back end work, you'll see that they have a lot of these game pods or game stations or whatever. You'll have some activity areas, etc. So I think you grow with how the generation grows, and you also then therefore need to work on how do you build the roles in your organization, because the new generation wants faster growth. They want more experience in shorter period of time, which goes completely against what a lot of science and theory teaches us, right? That you need to spend a lot more time doing something to be more to get the right kind of experience. Whereas the current generation wants fast experience, and in the current world where you have technology and you have knowledge available everywhere and anywhere at the click of a button, it's important that you provide those opportunities. You may not give them all possible roles, and all not every Gen Z might get the next stepping stone, but if the good ones get the right opportunities, they can grow, and over a period of time, you realize that, and the individual also realizes that, okay, how much time, what's next, what happens. So I think it's a mix of everything. I think you need to understand, because from what I understand is the generation after that's going to be even more tougher. So I think HR heads and CEOs have a lot more to do than just worry about Gen Z. The next generation's also entering the market. When I think about it, I'm like, because I think it's already Gen Z. I think what's after that? The next gen's also, I think another 2 years or 3 years. I think they'll be in as well, if I'm not wrong. So I think it's a lot more about focusing on how can we, add. So therefore, and going back to your earlier question, culture, it all centers, and that's where you set your tone. That's where it all. I think lots of it. I think for me, I was very lucky. I've had a lot of good managers and a lot of good colleagues, senior colleagues who've been part of my journey over the last 14 years, and they've been instrumental in multiple things. I was one of those, I want millennials who, while, and then that's where I go to saying that, I asked questions because I wanted to know answers while staying, of course, in my own lane, unlike what most people do. So I liked what I did, but I wanted to know answers and I wanted to do more because I wanted to grow. And I wanted, to understand rather than just do. So if I was given a task, I would like to understand why I'm doing this. And, and I think um, at that point of time, I was reporting into the head of HR directly because we didn't have a layer in the middle when I joined. I mean, a year after I joined, and I would actually, go at the end of the day and go with him and with a list of questions, and I would ask him, and I think, and no question was a stupid question for him. So he would take that kind of time, he would take that kind of effort to answer my questions, ensuring that. So he had one simple thing, right? If you make a mistake, and it's something even my father used to say, if you make a mistake, it's fine, make mistakes. And I think that is why, Saurav always was important for me as my manager and my boss, and he's still the eternal boss that I always tell people, is that, if you make a mistake, go ahead, make it. But you don't learn from the mistake, that's where you're going wrong. So you can make 10 different mistakes. There's no problem in making mistakes. If you don't learn from them and you make the same mistake again, that's where it's mess. And that's where you lose a learning opportunity. So I think for me, there are multiple such incidents, taking up, giving me, an opportunity to do roles that were technically a little above my level, but still having that faith in me to be that I will do a good job. So, when you have a leader like this or you have a manager like this, you strive to do more interest. You always strive to do well. So I think he kept throwing such opportunities at me, and I always wanted to ensure that, I do a good job, and, and to an extent also don't let him down. And I think that helped. And I mean, I always take that, and he's always a very nice person. I think that's something I've taken from him in my leadership journey from the last 14 years. I think 12 years since I know him, of course. That's what I've taken back with me, and I use that in each and every team that I work with, whether it's here in Hong Kong or it was back in India. I think, and open communication, respect, integrity, all the top three things that I said do come from him. So I think that's what makes a difference. When you're a good leader, you inspire people. I think someone has to do it. I don't know if it's a stigma. It's a stigma when you believe it's a stigma. I believe that um, everyone's a moral police in an organization when you reach a certain level or you're in a certain role, right? So you're going to be policing something or the other, whether it's moral policing, financial policing, legal policing, compliance policing, you're going to be doing it, right? So there's nothing to say that, whether it's a stigma. For me, it's not. I don't say that I go around with a ruler and I say, okay, this is how it has to be done. When I go back again, and it may sound repetitive, but you go back to the culture that you've set. You've set the tone already. You've set what you want to do and what is expected. You do not expect people to sit and drink in office at 4 o'clock and have alcohol and substance, at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. That's not okay. You don't go about doing funny things which are not okay and which do not constitute as part of the code of conduct of what your organization is set up for. So when you set the right kind of and let's reverse this or look at from the other direction, right? If something is going wrong and any individual in the organization feels, a little, let's say, has some sort of grievance, I would say, and wants to come and talk to someone, if there is no HR and there is something wrong that's happening to the individual, who does he or she go to? He, she, they. Who does the person go to? So there has to be someone. It could be HR. In a smaller company, it is the CFO or the CEO. So where there is no HR in smaller organization where there are 10, 12 people, 13 people, 20 people, where they may not have an HR, and especially in the new age of startups, not everyone has an HR, but there's someone who's doing that role. So I don't perceive it as a stigma. I think it depends on how far you take it in terms of moral policing. Are you really, what are you enforcing? But if you go back to the question that you asked me, how do you deal with Gen Z? They don't really work very well with moral policing, right? So you set the tone, you define what's acceptable for your organization, like what are the no can do's. So if you remember that, earlier, I don't know how far back I can go, but if I look at when I finished my MBA and I got into the world, formal dress code was mandatory. I'm just giving a brief example, right? Formal dress code, how you wear, what you wear, how long, short it is, all of that gets defined, right? Today, most companies have moved to either to business casuals, right? And then they've moved to, or here you have it's casual. And the policy says you should know what you're wearing, but of course you do. So when does policing come in there? So similarly, it comes in policies, it comes in the way we function. You have financial policing, so you don't want people to commit fraud or abuse the kind of company assets, policies, etc. You don't want people to go out and missell products. So there will be some sort of policing at some point of time in some way and form. I think it's more about defining what's the degree that you want for your organization. And if I'm talking about HR, I need to understand generations, I need to understand people, and I need to define my policies and guidelines accordingly. And I don't think then people look at it as moral policing. I think that's a very old-fashioned term, and very, very few. I think more traditionalistic companies look at it.
Right.
But I don't know if many new age companies actually call it moral policing anymore. See, if I look at it, for me, I don't differentiate between being junior or senior. If I look at my experience and how I am, I believe that if you are grounded, I think it works well for you. You may be a leader, and so as a leader, and as you move up the ladder, especially for young and um, young professionals today who are growing up the ladder a little faster because of their capabilities and experience and skill set, it's very important that you understand how you draw the fine line, right? Being a leader also means that you have to, and going back to my first point when I spoke about open communication, talk to people like they're people. There's no junior senior when it comes to getting your work done. It's about how you communicate with people, how you talk to people. Treat everyone with respect and be grounded. Don't make it, I sometimes people will not, they build hierarchies. Okay, I am the head of HR, so I will only talk to, let's say, my peers and one level below me. And for everything else, let them, manage on their own. I do not believe in that principle. In my journey, I've spoken to the CEOs of the companies. In fact, I started my role in Birla with managing senior folks as part of the rewards team. So my first interactions were always, of course, with the leadership team. And only when I came to my HRBP role that I started interacting with, individual contributors and team managers. But my first initial entry into the corporate world was always CEOs and leadership team and SMT or senior management teams. So I think it's important for me that you that's how you know that things are going right. If you are grounded, you can understand what they are going through. Don't forget where you came from. Not everyone is born with a spoon in their mouth, or a silver spoon. So you also grew from that. If you remember that, and if you know that they need your help, don't cross that line where you do the work for them. You also have people who will try and get you to do their work. Don't do that. Ensure you find that balance. Find the balance of being a good individual when you are respectful to people. People are more than happy. It's a learning curve actually. Sometimes it's difficult for junior people to also address a senior person, because for them it's we come from a culture in India especially where it's supposed to mean that someone who's senior means automatic respect, and deference to an extent. And but you have to find ways, and you can't, there's no prescribed method, because something might work with you but something might not work with Y or with Z. So it depends on how and who's the person in front of you, and what level of interaction do you have with that individual. Is it your team member who's, let's say, a contractual team member or someone with 1 or 2 years experience? It's an opportunity for you to help him or her grow. It helps, you can, if you see that spark in that person, the person can grow to the next level as well. If it's someone whom you interact with because you have some stakeholder relationship with him, her or her, you figure that out. So I think it's an individual based thing. I personally don't work on the principle that I have a standard way of working. I try and find ways, because we all are people and we'll all have different triggers or different points that it could be you can connect with someone because they have a child, and you have a child. I don't have kids, but I'm just giving an example, and that simple thing might connect, right? Or it could be because someone has a dog and you like dogs, and that leads to a point. It could be multiple things that can connect. And it also depends on what's degree of connect that you need. Is it just for work? Okay, finish, get done, understand what's on the floor. And as long as they know that you don't have like an ulterior motive that, and especially in HR, right? This happens, right? Do you have an ulterior motive? Why are you coming and talking to me? Is it because you want to go and talk to the senior management about something? Is it that you need some information? It's very, it's very tough, because especially when I started working in the health insurance business, a lot of people were new people, and they hadn't experienced an HR who was like me, who was coming down on the floor and talking to anyone and everyone. I don't have boundaries when it comes to this, because I think everyone's impacting my organization in some way and they're contributing to it. So I think that's where it makes a difference. And for me, I think there are multiple of such, where and I think we discussed this when he spoke as well, that it's not about what I have done for them, it's more about how nice or how good or how you had an impact. I think the multiple examples, and I think it's a easy way to get digressed from our topic or discussion. I think everyone can get a credential, right? And everyone can build competencies. It's about how you use them in the workplace that matters. I can have 4 degrees, right? It doesn't matter. Okay, let's talk about me. I have a degree in life sciences and biochemistry, 2 degrees, right? I did double major. Am I using it today? No, that's my credential. I'm not using it, right? I have two bachelors and I'm not using them, right? So I can have a credential, which doesn't matter, but I do use my BA degree at times, certain principles that I've learned then, now, or certain, so for example, or if am I doing any kind of coaching certifications, job evaluation certifications, am I using those? Yes, those credentials I do use. I'm assuming this is what you're talking about, right? Or did I get you right?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right. So where am I using it? Am I using that credential at work? Yes, important. How am I using it? Again, important. Same thing with competency. Do you have the competency? No. Are you willing to build it? Yes. Okay. Can you use the competency that you've built? Yes. Makes sense then. Similarly, if you have a competency, but it doesn't really work in your work environment, does that help? It doesn't help. So for me, I think both are equally important. I won't say that, I also feel that, we tend to have a lot of hype on the degree of, I mean, which B school does the individual come from? How many degrees does this or that person have? I don't think in today's world that matters so much. I think it's about how good you are and how do you use your credentials and your competencies in the right way at the right time, you know, and for lack of better word, maybe the right project or the right, instance or situation. I think that is what matters more. I think gone is the generation or the times when, I'm not saying, and I don't discount good education. It is important. I won't say it's not, but I think it should be a blend. And as HR professionals, I think, what we have realized is that, you need to keep in mind both. You can't only refer to one, because you might have someone from a great institute, but if that person can't, let's say I go and hire someone from campus from a data science college, or I go and hire someone from a good B school, but if that person can't really work in my culture, in my organization, and deliver outputs, it doesn't mean his credentials are wrong. It also doesn't mean his competency is not right. It just means it doesn't match what I need. He's not able to put that into action. So you may have whatever competencies and credentials, as long as you put it to work in the right way for you, where you're working. So basically, utilization of your capabilities. And I would move from competency versus credentials to what are your capability and skill sets and use them in the right way.
That's
To an
the
extent, it is, but sometimes you also need a credentials, right? Because if you need to do audit,
right,
you need to have a CA, right?
right,
You need to have a
right,
company secretary. You need someone who's got that credential. You need
right,
someone who's got the legal background. You just can't have someone. I can read an entire legal book. Doesn't mean I'm a lawyer. I can go
correct.
through 10 textbooks, but I need a degree. So it depends on where you're using what, right? Some of it is regulatory, some of it is statutory, some of it is the need of the hour, some of it is skill sets. So it's always, you always look at that. And that's why, if you remember, you always talk about well-rounded individuals. So those are the ones who use competency and credentials and put it to work in the right role. So that's what matters. Imagine if I put someone who's a CA into an HR role and tell him, okay, now go be an extrovert and talk to people. May not. But you put that same CA into a rewards and total rewards role, which is a compensation and benefits role, he might do a good job, or at least a decent job, right? And you have people who move from CA into, rewards or something like that. So it depends. It happens. I have a friend who's an MBBS doctor, and she's done her MBBS and she's done her internship and everything. And 2 years later, she realized she doesn't want to do this, and she's sitting and she's a head of talent management in one of the places I work at. So I think for me, it's resilience. I don't give up. I think resilience is something that stands for who I am, both personally and professionally. I think it's something that, I don't believe in giving up. I think, I reach a point and I'm not scared to ask for help. I'm not fearful of what someone might say. I'm open with it. I think resilience is something that works for me, and I think it's the same word that I would use for young professionals, because when you start off with the competition today, if you're not resilient, I don't think anything else matters, because there are a lot many more people and there are a lot many more opportunities today, and various I think roles across different spectrums. I mean, from being an influencer to being a CEO, you have multiple things to do across the board. So your competition's a lot more, you know. I think 10 years ago, someone was a influencer and a lot more easier with lesser competition as compared to today. So that's about it.